Hello friends, it's been a while since I made a tier list video, and I also haven't got a lot of dislikes recently, so it seemed like the perfect time to make another one. We knocked off all the obvious topics like games, covers, characters, and now we're scraping the bottom of the content barrel and ranking the locations of all the different games. We gotta get a bit more niche, but don't you worry, there's still a lot of content we can mine. I'm basing my opinions for this one on a few different pieces of criteria: how interesting a location is, how effectively the game utilizes the location. For example, does it implement it into puzzles at all? How atmospheric it is, and how immersive it is. This location can range from the broad, like the country Nancy's in, to the specific, such as the building she's in, whether that be a theater, or a high school, or a science lab. With that out of the way, let me introduce you to my friends, the tiers. At the bottom, we have Where Am I? I think this is pretty self-explanatory. The game gives no proper sense of the location. I'm just standing there bewildered. Not bewitched, maybe a bit bothered, but definitely bewildered. I don't know where in the world I am. I'm not Carmen Sandiego. Right above that, we've got Mom, Come Pick Me Up, and these two aren't necessarily better or worse than one another. They're just different. Mom, Come Pick Me Up is when I actively don't enjoy spending time in a location. I'm like ready to phone my mom to pick me up early from the party that is the Nancy Drew game. You know your location is dire when I'm putting you in Mom Come Pick Me Up, when I want to quit the game early. Right above that we have Picture Perfect, and these are games in which the setting looks outwardly pretty but actually lacks a lot of depth. Our penultimate tier is 4 to 5 stars in TripAdvisor. You know, it's pretty good. It gets a pretty good ranking, but it's not quite perfect. It gets a positive review from me, but there's still more it can strive for. Then at the very top, we have I Am There. It's when the location completely immerses me, when I'm just vibing, when I'm having the best time, living my best life. Like vicariously imagining myself going on vacation to these locations. And that's that. Those are the tiers. These opinions, as always, are all subjective to me and my personal opinions. Like, I'm not saying these are the only opinions. These are not the right and correct opinions. These are only my opinions. And I often have unpopular opinions. Let's get ranking. First in the hot spot is Secret of the Scarlet Hand, which is of course set in both Washington, D.C. and the main location, which is the Beach Hill Museum. Now I'm going to say this, for many of the locations on this list, I have never been to Washington, D.C. I don't really know that much about it. I know the White House is there. Nancy doesn't go to the White House, so it isn't an accurate depiction of what I know about D.C., but I assume that the metro is a significant method of transportation in DC, and I really like how the game incorporates that. It makes you feel like a much greater sense of the location, being able to travel around on the public transit like that and ride something that, you know, I assume is pretty iconic to the area. Even though the locations you end up traveling on it outside of the museum lack a little bit of depth, it's nice that you get the option to go further out into the city and go to different locations. The museum in general is just a really cool museum. I would love to go to that museum. I would love to climb the trivia pyramid and do all Sunny's little quizzes. It's got an indoor garden, for goodness sake. Like, the only other place that I've seen do that is a lighting store I went to when I was 7. It impressed me deeply. It had a real impact on me. One of the big critiques I have about this setting, though, is that this game is about, you know, South American history, but it's not set in South America. I think this game would be a lot higher up in terms of my estimation, which I know is very important to Her Interactive, my personal estimation, if it was actually set in a place of historical importance to the Maya in South America. So even though the museum is like a top tier museum. Would love to visit that museum in real life. I'm gonna have to say it's picture perfect because it lacks the depth of actually being in an authentic location. Next we have Secrets Can Kill, and I'm gonna rank them as one single entity because I don't think the location changes that much in between the two games. Obviously set in a high school, and also it's set in Florida. You can tell it's Florida because sometimes you look outside and you see a palm tree. I think this does a fair job of replicating the high school environment, particularly the eerie high school environment that you encounter at 4 p.m. or later when no one else is at the school. You've got the student art of middling degrees on the walls. You've got the library, which has a disappointing lack of Nancy Drew books. You've got the gym, which you avoid at all costs. All authentic to my own high school experience. And how can we forget the other locations you travel to? I mean, we can very easily forget the drugstore, which is the one difference between the original Secrets Can Kill and the Secrets Can Kill Remastered. But that's because you only go there at one point and it is extremely unimportant to the game, which you can see why they removed it from the remaster. But the most memorable location, I think, is the diner. I love me a good retro 50s diner. And like I said, the atmosphere is really eerie. I know not everyone experiences this with this game, because I feel like you either get this game or you don't. Okay, a lot of people mark this game very low in their tier lists, and I disagree. I think you're wrong. No, I don't think you're wrong. I think you've got a different opinion than me, and that's fine. But I think my opinion is better, and I think you don't get it. But I don't know what the eerie atmosphere adds in the context of this list. I don't know what that means. I think I'm going to ultimately say this one is picture perfect because although it does a pretty faithful job of creating your average American high school, like why even bother telling me I'm in Florida if you're not going to put any effort into making it clear that I'm in Florida other than a few JPEGs of palm trees? You know, that's a bit low effort. Next up, Creature of Kapu Cave, which is set in Hawaii. One of the things I think makes for a successful location in an Nancy Drew game is varied environments, different locations you can explore. And Kapu Cave definitely has that. It has a lot of different biomes, so to speak. You've got the beach, you've got the jungle, you've got the volcano, you've got the ocean, you've got the weird pineapple research facility, a common place to go to when you visit Hawaii. You know, I've never been to the Dole Pineapple Plantation, but I assume it's exactly like that. I think this game has great, very relaxing vacation vibes. A lot of that has to do with the music, but just in general, I find like it a very chill game. Even if staying with Big Island Mike does feel a bit more like work than vacation, like more like big exploitation Mike, am I right? I think at the end of the day, this is still a location that I highly enjoy existing in, and I would give it a 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. Next, we have Phantom of Venice. I wonder where this game is set. That's right, it's Venice. You guessed it, it's Venice. Venice, Italy, just to clarify. Another place I have never been and know very little about. This game again has the varied locations which I like, and I believe most of them are all kind of iconic Venice locations, like all the squares and such. And I like how there's different touristy activities to do there, like buy ice cream, you know, dance on stage for money in a cat suit, all the typical things that every tourist does when they're in Venice. You know, the must-dos. I love traveling on the little canals and hearing the different gondoliers sing their little songs, serenade me. It's so romantic. It's quite lovely. I can't articulate any cons about this location, but I feel like I have some. I can't quite say why. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something about this game that is just not quite perfect. Maybe it's just a thing with Nancy Drew games. Given the limitations they have, they can't fill different locations that usually would be busy. They can't fill those with crowds. And that makes games like Phantom of Venice feel a little uncanny, because you know Venice is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. You know that there should be tons of people here, and yet it looks like it's been locked down for the plague. Okay, Trail of the Twister, which is set in Oklahoma, and I did read somewhere recently that Oklahoma actually doesn't really get tornadoes, and I don't know if that's true. I did read it on the internet, but it is influencing my decision. You know, how much research did Her Interactive really do? One thing about this game is that it wants to be Shadow Ranch so bad. Oh my god, the farmhouse, just absolute knockoff Shadow Ranch vibes, but so much less fun and interesting to explore. In fact, I think pretty much all the locations lack depth. You can drive around and stop at different places, but those are mainly flat and featureless. Occasionally you see a cow. I think the one really successful location in this game is Pa's store. I love that it's part general store, part local history museum. That feels very real to the small town experience. You know, you walk in and, oh, here's the famous local stick. And that sounds like a joke, but, you know, when it comes down to it, what is a divining rod if it's not just a stick? But yeah, I think this game's location is incredibly flimsy and lacks a lot of depth. It's going straight in the where am I category. You know, I could have just been swirled up by a tornado and dropped it anywhere. I wouldn't know where I was. Treasure in the Royal Tower set in Wisconsin. You know, I knew nothing about Wisconsin before playing this game, and after it I think I knew even less, because I have this assumption now that Wisconsin is closely connected to French history, and I just don't think that's true. But at the same time, a small part of me does believe it. Anyway, Wisconsin aside, Treasure in the Royal Tower, the Wickford Castle, is without a doubt one of the greatest locations in the Nancy Drew series. It's just a totally cozy, rich atmosphere to explore. They do really great work with the sound design, with the sound of the snow outside and all the warm tones inside to make it feel really cozy. And then later you even get to explore and venture outside into the snow. So it opens up, and it's got my favorite thing in all the Nancy Drew games, a secret passage. Now that's essential to any location getting in the top tier. I just don't know where to side on the Wisconsin debate. Is it 4 out of 5? Or is it I'm there? You know what? I'm visualizing myself there. I'm manifesting myself there. What's that thing the kids on TikTok do? I'm shifting myself there. So it's going in top tier. I just fucking love Wickford Castle. Alrighty, Waverly Academy. Warnings at Waverly Academy to give it its full title, which is set at an all-girls school in upstate New York. Yes, we have another scholarly location, but this one is really great because it's very distinct from the school in Secrets Can Kill. You know, it's a school, but it's for rich people. It really does feel, though, that it's like in someone's old manor that's been converted into a school, which I really like about it. This is another location that I just love to roam around, viewing their Victorian cutlery, plinking and plonking on the piano, and working in the snack shop. Oh, this snack shop, my beloved, give me that bagel and cheese. One thing I will say, though, is that I wish you could explore more of the grounds. That is really very limited, and I remember even the first time I played it that I felt disappointed that we didn't get to see more of the outside area. And I think that could more strongly emphasize the New York location. Like, when I think of a setting that combines both upstate New York and a school, my mind immediately is like dark academia. I want to see all the foliage on the trees. I want to peep some leaves. Like, those vibes could be really strong, and I feel like there was potential for them to be there in Waverly Academy, but at the end of the day, just the grounds are way too limited, and you know they have a lot of grounds. You just know it. They have their own snack shop, for goodness sake. They're baking their own cookies on demand. You know they've got at least 10 acres out there. They've probably got a stables. Corinne's definitely a horse girl. Come on now. Now I'm just like straight up making things up below the location. I'm like, damn, wish we got to explore the stables at Waverly. There's absolutely no evidence that there are stables. I gave 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. Not enough horses. Secret of the Old Clock. In my notes, I've just written for the setting, the depression smiley face. So that's really helpful. Thanks, Chloe. I do remember that it's set in Titusville, which is... You know, this requires some research. Hold on. Okay, so according to the Nancy Drew Wiki, Titusville is supposed to be in Illinois, which I had absolutely no idea about, which I think speaks volumes. But I have to cut it some slack. I don't think the location is emphasized as a selling point as much as it is in the other games. Like, think of Phantom of Venice. The setting is literally in the title. Like, you have some expectation about the setting being a reason why you'd buy it. You know, they're not out here on the cover of Secret of the Old Clock saying, "Visit beautiful Illinois." I don't know anything about Illinois, just to be clear. So I do think the time period, more than the physical location, is the more important setting. Although there are some concessions to the time period, like delivering telegrams, Nancy's car, the fact that Jim Archer is on the verge of financial ruin and bankruptcy and all Nancy can do for him is sew his wife a dress. I think ultimately it feels more like a Spirit Halloween costume version of the 1930s. And Jane's character design, I think, is exemplary of this. I mean, just look at her. But maybe that's me seeing history through a black and white lens. People in the 1930s would never wear bright purple. Everyone knows they just wore shades of gray. And not that Nancy games are super strict about historical accuracy, which I found out the hard way when I discovered that Lizzie Applegate isn't actually a real person. I do like roaming around the town in Nancy's little car. I think that really helps to establish place and the feeling of the small town, and that they've really put thought into all the different locations, and even if you can't visit all of them, that each of them has their own individual unique voice lines that you can go through when you're delivering the telegrams. I think that's a really nice touch, a simple way to just make the location feel more alive when they're working from a limited place, both in terms of technology and budget. But you know what? It's picture perfect. It's picture perfect. You're telling me a man can design a mini golf course like that in the 1930s? No. No, I don't think so. Next we have Curse of Blackmore Manor, which is set in England in a manor. Now you may know from some of my other videos that my mom is English, so I have been to England quite a few times, and I have to say Blackmore Manor does not feel very English. If you've ever been to a National Trust property in the UK, you'll know what I mean. Like, for one, there's not enough pine cones on the seats. But I cannot deny that Blackmore Manor is one of the most iconic Nancy Drew locations. It is just incredibly vivid. It feels like it was interior designed by someone who was on lots of psychedelic drugs. I think ultimately I'm gonna have to put it in 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor though. And sorry to all the people who just disliked this video because I'm not putting Blackmore Manor in the top tier. Now we have Danger by Design, which is set in Paris in a fashion studio. This is another game which shows off the location with a lot of varied locations that are very clearly inspired by real iconic Parisian landmarks. Like there's that one park that I forget the name of, there's the catacombs, there's a little Parisian cafe. Speaking of which, the last time I played this game, I was inspired, influenced enough to make myself a croque-monsieur. A croque-monsieur. My French accent is bad. I know I'm supposed to be Canadian, but I can't help it. I might just beep out the because it was so bad. It was so embarrassingly bad. Anyway, I made myself a nice little French sandwich. It was really good. And I think that's probably the highest compliment. Like the game and its location actually influencing me to change my life outside of the game. That is power. Nancy Drew has me in the ultimate gorilla grip. So just based on that, I'm there. Maybe it's not the best location to Paris. Like, you know, when I think of going to Paris, I don't imagine, you know, getting yelled at by some American woman who's hired me to make her overly complicated batches of tea. You know, that's not exactly my ideal vacation to France. Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. This is like an interesting one because obviously it's set on a cool historic train and the train travels through different locations, so you can't exactly pinpoint one exact location, but I think most of it takes place in Nevada, I believe. Real Nancy Drew fans, please correct my fake Nancy Drew knowledge. Yes, I am just a fake Nancy Drew fan. I have devoted my whole YouTube channel to be about Nancy Drew, but somehow I'm still a fake fan. Because I don't know what state is in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. Anyway, I flipping love trains, especially historic trains with secrets on board that are haunted. Like, I can't think of any better combination. And this train is just delightful. I love exploring it. I love seeing all the different details on it. I love the design of it. If I had one criticism, it would be that I'm disappointed we don't get to go into any of the sleeping compartments, because I think that would be very interesting, especially in terms of some extra snooping on the side. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's such a good train that I'm not going to hold that against it too much. And then I guess the main location that you end up visiting, other than the train in Blue Moon Canyon, which is it's just like a canyon and a mine, you know? Like, even though it's called Blue Moon Canyon, it's in the title, you don't play it for the canyon. Like, no one's out here being like, oh boy, my favorite part in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, the canyon. No one says that. No one says that. But the main location, other than those two, is Copper Gorge, which actually I think is in Colorado, now that I'm saying it out loud. Absolute fake Nancy Drew fan. Oh, I'm gonna get killed off, cancelled by the fandom. This fucking poser! How dare she sit here and say that she knows about Nancy Drew when she doesn't even know Copper Gorge is in Colorado. Well, just have to hand in my Nancy Drew badge and my Nancy Drew gun at the end of this video, I guess. Anyway, Copper Gorge. It's a delightful little town with a small town much like the one in Trail of the Twister, except instead of being run by a depressed old man, it's run by someone who doesn't get nearly enough human contact. And you can buy taffy. I really like the map they did of Copper Gorge. It's very charming and really gives you a good feeling of the town, even if you don't get to fully explore it yourself. Yeah, I can't help myself. It's got a train. It's just chewing straight up to the top tier. I can't prevent it. You can't stop a train. It's just gone. It's just gone straight up there. I couldn't do anything. You think I, a 5'1" person, could stop a train? No. So it's in the top tier. I'm sure not many people are going to argue with me about that. At least I hope not. Maybe I've completely misread the fandom and everyone's like, oh, we hate the train in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. Get rid of the train and this would be a much better game. Okay, Nancy Drew, Legend of the Crystal Skull, which is set in New Orleans. And this is mainly set at the house of an eccentric old man, as many Nancy Drew games are. This game really embraces the kind of spooky but fun aspects of New Orleans. And it'll always be a disappointment to me that you don't get to really explore the city a lot. I do like that you get like a little bit of a taste of it as Bess. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Just sitting on her balcony looking out on that rainy street is just delightful. Like, you could make that into a 10-hour ambience video and I'd still be hungry for more. Speaking of hungry, I also love going to Granny Pumpkin's Cajun Cookin' and buying myself some gumbo from Shorty after he got out from prison. And I also think our curio shop is a very interesting location to explore, especially because it kind of borrows that idea from some of the older Nancy Drew games that you can look around at a lot of stuff. It's not necessarily going to be important, but it just really helps set the scene and establish the location, I feel. But this game has one main flaw, namely that the house has no kitchen or bathroom. It is glaringly obvious in this game, I feel, and leads you to wonder, what do they do? What do they do? Do they just eat Renee's stash of Cocoa Kringles? Do they go to Granny Pumpkin's Cajun Cookin' every night? Like, what do they do for the bathroom? Is that why Renee's garden is so good? Because it's so well fertilized? Like, I don't want to think about these things. And it's making me. The game is making me. And that is my reason why it's only a 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. Yeah, I think it's a 4 out of 5. I kind of feel like it's a picture perfect 0.5 because I do wish you could have explored more of the actual city. But c'est la vie, as they say in France and perhaps also New Orleans. Well, really, they say it anywhere. I live in Canada, I'm saying it. So and they just say it worldwide, really. Okay, now we have A Message in a Haunted Mansion, which is set in San Francisco and a haunted mansion. This is another game where you don't get to explore the city at all, which is disappointing, but I still think it does a good job of establishing the location by having that first scene when you're outside the house looking in. You can see that it's one of those iconic San Francisco houses, and the way that it's decorated inside also reflects that. All like the kind of Victorian furnishings and decor really build up an atmosphere. I also love all the ambient spooks you can just encounter in this game. I feel like the later spooky games, they have their scary moments, don't get me wrong. Like, just think of the mirror and Shadow at the Water's Edge. You'll immediately know what I mean. But this one kind of, spooks can occur at any moment, and they're often like quite small, like just a spooky sound you hear and you're like, did I imagine that? Was it real? Did I really hear that? And I think that also does a really good job of building up the atmosphere of the haunted mansion. Also, there's just like the latent cool house energy of having a basement saloon. Like, if I get wildly rich one day, I'm gonna build myself a house with a basement saloon and secret passages. Cause oh yeah, this game has multiple secret passages. What a game, what a location. I love it. Okay, the Shattered Medallion, which is set in New Zealand. And I feel like this game makes a very poor effort to actually explore the location and make you feel like you're in New Zealand. You know, I could be in any number of places. Like, they're like, oh, but the team names are named after New Zealand birds. Like, that has such a low impact. I really don't think they're making the most of the location with the different places you can explore. And in fact, a lot of them just feel recycled from older, better games with stronger locations, like the kayaking. Like, I'd much rather go kayaking in Danger on Deception Island. And, like, there's not even any more interesting to go on the kayak in Shattered Medallion. Yeah, where am I? Where am I? I could be in Old Zealand, for all I know. Alright, Alibi in Ashes, which takes us to Nancy's hometown of River Heights. I do find the location a bit disappointing in this game. I find that there's very limited locations to explore, and the ones that you can explore, they don't really extend, they don't really expand at all. They're very limited in terms of the exploration you can do in them. They're mainly just like one room, and that one room has perhaps like 3 screens you can click on. Just pretty disappointing overall, because I think, you know, setting it in River Heights, there's so much you could do. There's so many interesting things you can explore. And much like Secret of the Old Clock, you can drive around the town and see all these different locations, but I feel like it gives much less of a sense of place than Secret of the Old Clock, because Secret of the Old Clock gives you reason to explore all the different nooks and crannies of Titusville, whereas in, like, River Heights, there's no reason to really go to any of the other locations other than the ones that feature in the main storyline. There's nothing to see there. I think Alexi's store is interesting. I do wish there's more to see in there. If it emulated more of the attitude of Zeke's, where you could just look at a whole bunch of things in there, even if they're not important. And of course, who could forget Nancy's bougie-ass house? Like, you know Carson's making that big lawyer money, those big lawyer bucks, just from looking at her house. Like, hooey! You know, they say, like, Hannah Groon's the housekeeper. Why don't we meet Hannah in that game? It's like they completely forgot Hannah later. It's like they were like, oh, Nancy can have a housekeeper. That's not very relatable. And then she lives in like this house that looks like a furniture showroom. Whatever. I'm just speculating here. I don't know if that's really why they got rid of Hannah. But you know what? I think that house probably takes like a whole army of cleaners. Not just Hannah. Although, to be honest, now that I think about it, Nancy's so rarely there, and it seems like Carson is also so rarely there, so maybe there's not that much work to do after all. Anyway, I've gone on a really silly tangent. Alibi and Anxious, I think it's a bit picture perfect. Like I say, I do wish there's some more depth locations, more interesting places to go. I honestly wouldn't mind if, like, all the places were just, like, as limited as the ones in the current game, just that there are more of them. Danger on Deception Island, set in the San Juan Islands in Washington State. This game is the blueprint for how you create a strong Nancy Drew game setting. There's so many different places to go to, so much to explore, and each of them is equally as interesting. And again, the game really expands as you go. There's more places you can go to and discover and explore and snoop. Like, even at the very end of the game, you go to a whole new location. The reason this location is so strong is probably partly due, at least, to her interactive being located in the Pacific Northwest. Like, I can kind of see why Alibi and Ashes lacked a lot of depth, because it doesn't really exist. They don't really have much to go on there. Anyway, I heckin' love Danger on Deception Island. I think it's a wonderful game with an incredibly strong location. I love being in every single one of the spots. I love Whale World. I love the Hot Kettle Cafe, just a dream cafe. I love kayaking around. I love exploring the beaches. Just a really nice time. The sea caves. Oh my god, the sea caves. How could I almost get away with not mentioning the sea caves? Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, which is set in Pennsylvania, which is another state I don't really know much about. Do they make pencils there? Is that why they call it Pennsylvania? Anyway, obviously it's also set at Moon Lake, another fictional location, but in this case I think they really did a good job of making it seem very vivid. It really just feels like the epitome of the summer lake cabin. Summer cabin lake? Summer lake cabin? Cabin summer lake? Some combination of those words will be correct and sound right. Like, you know, I'd rent that cabin on Airbnb. I don't care that it's fallen apart. And, you know, say what you like about the woods, the bird puzzle, the bug puzzle. I think there's a lot of value in really letting the player roam extensively and get super familiar with an environment that makes it feel a lot more real. You really have to navigate them. You really have to learn the location. And oh my god, the basement speakeasy, just slightly lower than a basement saloon on my tier list of basement abodes, which could be a whole other thing, I guess. Comment if you want me to make a tier list of ranking all the best things to renovate your basement into. Anyway, I really like the setting of Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake. Ghost of Thornton Hall, set in Georgia, on an old family estate cloaked by fog and night, with Spanish moss hanging from every tree, decay coming up from the very roots of the house, the very bones of the house. Oh my god. I just think Thornton Hall is such an atmospheric location. It's got a haunted manor, a graveyard, secret passages, a smaller haunted manor. What more could you want from a spooky location? Even though it doesn't have as many good ambient scares as in Message in a Haunted Mansion, I still think it does a really good job of building up that spooky atmosphere. Okay, Labyrinth of Lies, which is set in Greece, also a museum, also an amphitheater. I've never been to Greece, and this game doesn't make me want to go to Greece. You know, the museums kind of lame, to be quite honest. I mean, there's no giant trivia pyramid. I do love how batshit the stage set is, again, designed by someone who is definitely high, but I don't think that's enough to redeem it. Mom, come pick me up from my Greece vacation. Greece looked a lot cooler in the pictures. Okay, Ransom of the Seven Ships, which is set in the Bahamas. And you know, I honestly think the location is one of the strongest parts of this game. You've got a whole bunch of different activities you can do that really interact with the setting. Like, you can go sailing, you can go scuba diving, you can go roaming around on your little golf cart, you can climb up cliffs and get hit in the head by monkeys throwing rocks. It's like they finish the location, then they're like, oh, wait, this game's supposed to have a story. Oh, no, the game was supposed to have characters. Oh my god, it's due on Friday. Oh! So I think the location is certainly the most polished aspect of this game. So I think at the most it's picture perfect because, you know, like I say, it's got a pretty cool, vivid setting, but it doesn't have the gameplay and the story to back it up. There's not enough meaningful interaction between all those aspects and the setting. Like, honestly, if you think about it, the plot of this game could have been set anywhere. Like, Bez gets kidnapped. Oh no, a past culprit from a previous game has come back. Whoa! Like, it could be set in any isolated location, really. I mean, the setting is cool and all, but does it make that much impact on the story? Honestly, I'm doing it a favor by putting it as high up as I am. Sea of Darkness, which is set in Iceland. I've never been to Iceland, but after playing this game, I feel like I have. The opposite reaction I get to Labyrinth of Lies, but I think this is another just incredibly vivid setting. I love seeing the little town. I love being able to go up into the crow's nest and look all around and see the 360 view of the Northern Lights, which are just gorgeous. Exploring an old-timey ship is just so cool. Magnus's cabin is super cozy. The only really critique I can make about it is I feel like the Misty Skip, they could have done a lot more with that location. I feel like you don't really end up doing much there unless you indulge them in doing the weird kitchen puzzle, which I never do. I wish you could explore more of the ice caves earlier on in the game, but those are small things, little smidgens, but it still gets it a 4. Does it? No, you know what? I'm immediately changing my mind. I'm there. Shadow at the Water's Edge, which is set in Japan, just outside Kyoto, and then you can travel into Kyoto. Now, I'm not an expert on Japanese culture, and neither are her interactive. But you know, at least they tried. I think they build up a really interesting kind of conflict and tension between the traditional Japan of the Ryokan traditional and the modern Japan of Kyoto and Yumi's world and the pachinko parlor. I think that's a really interesting contrast, and I really like how they're trying to explore both sides. You know, the atmosphere may not be accurate, but it is strong. I mentioned earlier when talking about Phantom of Venice is that in a lot of Nancy Drew games, you go to locations which you feel like should be really populated, but they often aren't. And I think it works well in this game because this game is intended to be a spooky game. It feels a little bit isolating. It feels like a little bit eerie. It puts you on edge. Like you're in this pachinko parlor. No one else is around. There's just you and the clinking and plinking of the balls. Yeah, so I think 4 to 5, just because it lacks a little on the accuracy front. I think the passion was there, and I think it still comes out to be a pretty strong setting. Okay, Stay Tuned for Danger, which is set in New York City. I mentioned this earlier in the context of A Message in a Haunted Mansion, but I think it's made even better use of in this game is that when they use the establishing shots of the exterior of the buildings to help emphasize and build up a feeling of the setting. They were very restricted in terms of game design and the scope they could do, but by showing every location that you visit from an exterior shot initially, that really helps, I think, build up the feeling of New York and really enables you to feel like you're there. Immerses you, in other words. The only more immersed I could feel would be if I had a hot, soft pretzel in my hand. I will say they make New York out to be better than it actually is. This might be a controversial opinion, but I like Stay Tuned for Danger's New York City better than I liked actual New York City. So yeah, 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. I also think they do a really good job of tricking you into making you feel that the locations are populated. A lot through the sound design again, but in the TV studio, when they're filming that scene, that first scene, you can see the silhouettes of everyone, you can hear all their conversation. They employ like a few little tricks that really trick you into thinking it's more populated than it actually is, so it doesn't feel as eerie and uncanny when there aren't as many people around. Okay, next up we have The Captive Curse, which is set in a historic castle in Germany. I don't have much to say about this one. It's no Wickford Castle, but it's still a very interesting castle. You got your secret passages. You know I love me a secret passage. And in this game, I really can be holding a hot, soft pretzel in one of my hands, albeit a digital hand, but still. I think they could have leaned more into the kind of spooky vibes. I don't think they really take as much advantage of that as they could, but nevertheless a fun setting, 4 out of 5. Okay, The Deadly Device, which is set in Colorado in a science lab. Now, I've made it no secret that I hate The Deadly Device. I am not a STEM girly. Ask me to do a math puzzle and my brain just overheats. So I don't enjoy being there feeling surrounded and overwhelmed by math and science puzzles on every side. But I will say that's not my only criticism of the game, because that is a very personal thing. I will admit that. I think my biggest criticism of this game is that it feels very claustrophobic. The location you get to explore is very limited. It doesn't open up very much like many other Nancy Drew games do. And you never get to leave the lab. I remember the first time I played, I kept expecting to be able to leave. I thought that maybe you'd get to do like a snowmobiling section even at the end, because they kind of hint to that. But no, you never get to leave. You're trapped there in a horrible science and math prison. I would say, Mom, come pick me up, but I don't even know if I know where the front door is. Will they let me leave? Mom, please, descend from the skylight like Mission Impossible. Just get me out of here. The final scene, which is set in St. Louis in a historic theater. I don't think we get much of an impression of St. Louis, but that's fine. I do obviously really like the theater. It's very cool. All I can say is that I would join Nicholas Falcone and Hadit to help save the theater. 4 out of 5. Next, we have The Haunted Carousel, which is set in an amusement park in New Jersey, and I will say that the greatest impression of New Jersey we get is Harlan's accent. And to be honest, this is another setting which is quite disappointing. I wish you got to ride more of the rides, at least if you got to explore the haunted house a bit more, because an underwater-themed haunted house is such a cool concept. Like, there's so much potential there, but we only get to see silly little spook number 10, and that is devastating for me. I do like really riding the carousel, and I like how there's like an activity to do while you're on it to grab the golden ring that really makes you interact with the setting. But I think ultimately it's a bit disappointing. I love a good amusement park, and I feel like they kind of squandered it. So I think it's just gonna be picture perfect. It pains me to say it. You don't even get to ride the shark roller coaster. Nancy can get killed by it, but she can't ride it? Why not? Next up, we have Haunting of Castle Molloy, which is set in a crumbling castle in Ireland. I will say it does feel like a bit of a stereotype that one of the 2 locations in this game is a pub, even if they don't serve alcohol. I think the castle is really beautiful. I like how you can see that it's decayed and collapsed over time. Like there's that one view from the central room downstairs where you can look out past like the table and there's just nothing there. Like one wall has entirely crumbled away and you can see like the beautiful starry sky beyond. Like that is genuinely one of the most beautiful Nancy Drew screens in the whole franchise. And I think it's incredibly underrated. Mom can come pick me up from the bog though. The bog sucks, pun intended. 4 to 5. Okay, Secret of Shadow Ranch. She's just so beautiful to me. This is like my dream setting. You probably could have predicted this. It's my favorite game, and part of the reason for that is how wonderful I think the setting is. I even love doing Shorty's chores because they just make me feel so immersed into ranch life. I love riding Bob through the desert, riding a horse to a ghost town. What's cooler than that? Like, getting to explore a ghost town is so awesome. I do wish you could explore a little bit more of it, and maybe if there's a bit more spooks that would have been cool, but you know, not to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm definitely not gonna look Bob in the mouth. He might bite my nose off. I hear horses do that. I don't think I've even mentioned, but it's set in Arizona, on a ranch. I've literally daydreamed about my ideal itinerary on a trip to Shadow Ranch. Like, I've traveled there in my daydreams. I've imagined each day clearly in detail. I love it. I'm there. Okay, next we got The Silent Spy, which is set in Scotland, I believe in Edinburgh. I don't think this game has too many concrete ties to the setting. It's got quite superficial ones, like, oh, you can play the bagpipes and you can eat some haggis, but they don't really feel super deep. And it doesn't even make sense for the whole spy espionage thing. We're gonna hit one of the world's most important cities where it'll make the biggest impact, one of the biggest hotspots in the world, Edinburgh. Like, no, no, that does not make sense. Anyway, so I think it's going to be a Where Am I from me. I think, again, this is a game where the story could be set anywhere, and it wouldn't make much of a difference. In fact, like I say, I think the story would make a lot more sense if it was set somewhere that's a bigger, like, cultural hub with a greater population and more people, like, coming and going and, you know, stopping over there. It doesn't really make sense to use Edinburgh as that location. I also have issue with this one because I think this game is the worst offender for having locations which feel like they should be busy and populated but not. Like, it feels very strange and uncomfortable being in a train station with no one else in it every time you go to the train station. Except for, like, there's always this one weird fucking guy there. Okay, we're getting down to the wire here. Next up we have White Wolf Bicycle Creek, which is set in Alberta in Canada. I've actually never been to Alberta in the winter. I don't know how accurate this is. I haven't spent much time in Alberta in general, to be honest. I will say, though, I believe at the start of this game, Nancy's in River Heights, and it feels like it's the summer. There's someone outside, you know, mowing their lawn. The birds are chirping. The sun is shining. Like, I don't know if Her Interactive know this, but it's not winter year-round in Alberta. It gets quite hot in the summer, actually. I don't know if they realize that, but, you know, maybe it's just, like, high up in the mountains and it's spring. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I think this game setting is pretty good. I think the lodge is pretty cozy. You can explore quite a lot. There's a lot of, like, environmental hazards to navigate, which makes sense for this snowy atmosphere, like the avalanche, the pond ice cracking beneath you. You don't get enough time to relax into the coziness of the lodge because you're always rushing around, cleaning people's rooms, making them omelets with Canadian bacon. There's no time to enjoy the setting because you've got to get back for the lunch rush. Hurry, hurry. Disappointing. 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. Okay, Midnight in Salem, obviously set in Salem, apart from the very start of the game, which is set in Austria, and I will say The Austria in this game is very, where am I? You know, if you hadn't told me it was Austria, I would not have known. I wouldn't even have known what continent I'm on, okay? Like, I probably would have guessed Europe, because there's lots of castles in Europe, but there's castles in everywhere. There's castles in Wisconsin, for goodness sake. I do think that the location in this game is one of the stronger parts of it. It's a very cool location. Like, the color palette is very effective, I think, in creating a mood. And I've never been to Salem, but from what I gather, they do a pretty good job of replicating and condensing a bunch of the iconic locations in Salem. I do like how you can create the pumpkins, the jack-o'-lanterns as well, and kind of place them around the map. That merely makes you feel like you're having an influence and an impact on the location. I will say that Midnight in Salem's flawed navigation system is a huge detriment to exploring the environment and having a fun time exploring the environment, because it's just so hard to navigate at times for no good reason. You don't want to spend as much time just relaxing and exploring the location because it's just so painful to do. But I think I might give it 4 out of 5 on TripAdvisor, because I feel like they did put some effort into trying to replicate Salem and make it an interesting environment to explore. And that is probably the highest Midnight in Salem will rank on any tier list I make. Okay, last one, Tomb of the Lost Queen. I purposefully saved this one for last because this is the most disappointing setting in any Nancy Drew game for me. It's just like, honey, you had so much potential. There's so much you could do. It basically writes itself. It's just so disappointingly limited. Like, there's so many interesting locations you could go to in an Egyptian desert. You could go to a marketplace. You could go to an oasis. You could go to a pyramid. Like, and you're just at this one tomb the whole time, and the tomb doesn't even expand that much inside. It feels very isolating for no good reason. It's really a one-day vacation spot. And I say that disparagingly. I think that's a big part of why this game is so boring and forgettable. You know, the location of this game is as dry as a centuries-old mummy. It's absolutely desiccated. It is dead. Mom, please come pick me up from the ancient Egyptian tomb. Anyway, that's my list. I don't know how controversial I've been. It's always so hard to read the room when you're the one creating the list and you're so thoroughly stuck in your own opinions. But please do let me know your most favorite location of any Nancy Drew game and your least favorite. And I'll see you soon for another video. That is, if you haven't unsubscribed over my bad Nancy Drew opinions.